international affairs editor Armen Georgian joins us now. Armen, looking at the international reactions to this, we've seen a lot of condemnation, and the UN Security Council set to meet on the issue this Tuesday.
Yeah, the UN Security Council has considered the question of Myanmar several times, and it's essentially been paralysed by divisions as to how it should go forward. For example, just over 2 years ago, there was a draft resolution circulated which suggested that the country had to make progress on the repatriation of Rohingya Muslims from Bangladesh back into Myanmar, and that accountability had to be achieved, that those responsible for the abuses would have to be brought to justice and so forth. But essentially, China is, I think, the main actor that has been pushing back against those kinds of efforts. That particular draft resolution didn't come to a vote because it didn't have enough support ultimately. It's not as if the UN is not aware of what's happening. There was a briefing by the head of a UN inquiry which accused Myanmar's military of genocide, of committing genocide against the Rohingya Muslims. So there was a briefing. The UN General Assembly has considered the issue as well, but we've seen in the UN Security Council these very familiar divisions between China and Russia on the one hand, those two permanent veto-wielding powers, and the Western members like Britain, France, and the USA. For the Russians and the Chinese, this smacks very much of yet another Western attempt at humanitarian intervention. So similar as we've seen on other big international issues, these divides in the Security Council have prevented what the West would probably want, as in more robust action.
And that divide in the UN Security Council playing out in the reactions as well that we've seen to this coup d'etat. China quite a muted response, and it has in the past sided with the military. So, tell us more about its side on it all today.
Well, for China, Myanmar is strategically important. It's seen as a kind of bridge to the Indian Ocean. They've had military exercises with the Myanmar Navy, for example. In terms of Chinese investment in Myanmar, the Chinese investment is actually relatively modest if you compare it to other countries in the Road and Belt Initiative. But having said that, for China, it's very important to have political stability in Myanmar. We've heard, I think you mentioned earlier, Eve, this news about a youth network activist group that wants to launch a civil disobedience campaign that suggests that people really don't want to go back to the dark days of the dictatorship. They're going to put up some sort of resistance, and if that happens, then it doesn't give China the political stability that it needs to expand its influence in Myanmar, to say, look, you don't need the West, you just need our model of investment and development. And there were already some concerns about that model. For example, a few years ago, there was a major dam project financed by Chinese energy interests that had to be pulled because villagers were being displaced. The environment was clearly being damaged. So it's not as if people today simply accept the Chinese way of doing things and say, okay, well, we don't need the West at all anymore. So I think despite China's growing influence in the country over the last few years, it's not a straight path ahead for China.
Okay, interesting one to watch. Armen, for now, thanks very much indeed.